Good morning, everyone. This is Poets Time. My name's Linda Jackson, and I'm very happy to be here again with a new guest today, Peter A. And it's October. We are kind of moving a little bit, we hope, out of COVID. Some of us are hoping for our boosters soon. And it does feel like a transition period, and I hope people are not taking unnecessary risks, but maybe feeling their life coming back a bit and going forward with that. So I'm still enjoying bringing excellent writers to you, meeting them myself, reading their work. And today is quite a fabulous day because I've got a guy I met a couple of years ago who comes from Airdrie. He's written a collection called The Art of Insomnia. And I think it was a kind of twinning in some ways because I had just written a collection on my mother, The Cabinet, and I think we both went through death with very pained hearts, to be honest, different perspectives. Peter's wife, Helen, had died, and he wrote this wonderful collection called The Art of Insomnia, and my mum died, and I wrote the collection called The Cabinet. So there was something it really attracted me as well about this book, and still it's not in grief that I read it, it's with a lot of respect that I read the way this is constructed and how he's tried to move through a life with someone and lose them. So we are very lucky to have him here today, and he has got a new collection. He's got a couple of pamphlets he's working on, one on war, and he's bringing a lot of his work together for a second collection, which I hope will be out next year. But meanwhile, less babbling from me, and I'm going to hand you over now to the man himself. This is Peter A.
Thanks very much, Linda. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Although Art of Insomnia, which came out in May, is my main piece of work of late, I'm only going to read one poem from it. The book is divided into 4 sections, which deal with the 9-month period following the loss of my wife 2.5 years ago. And the second section is called French Retreat, with various meanings of retreat there. 3 months after I lost my wife, I decided I had to escape. I was just finding the kindness of people a bit overwhelming, and I thought getting away for a week would assist. And the first poem I'm going to read is from the collection. It's called Found in France. And basically it represents a conversation I had with my wife shortly after I arrived there to make her feel not so bad about not being with me in France. Found in France. Though you would have to concede its picture-perfect rural beauty, here for the record are the things you wouldn't like about the place. The middle of the countryside, such a distance from anywhere. The crowded transport transferring from the airport. The open windows to keep the place cool, inviting houseflies. The doorway dogs, the ever-darting, omnipresent lizards, the lack of television. The steps, useful for others, which would be impossible for you. Around those steps, the lavender, which at home would aid your sleeping, but here for you a nightmare, attracting wasps and bees. The spider's improbably small body, impossibly spindly long legs, waiting in the shower room, patiently. Also the tiny white spider. I bet you never saw an entirely white spider. The mosquitoes, the hornets, the blood-sucking horseflies, almost certainly lining up to feast upon you in particular. The bats awaiting the chance to be entangled in your lush long hair. The swimming pool that would be out of bounds for you, the conversation in which you would not wish to speak, the revelation before bedtime concerning the cleaner's cat, its trophy mice, and the minor flea infestation. Successfully eradicated, we think, but let us know if you get bitten. As for me, the only aspect of the French place I do not appreciate is you not being here. Now, the second poem, it's actually, I've cheated a little bit here. It's a combination of two poems which relate to each other, Ex Cathedra 1 and Ex Cathedra 2. Whereas the first poem I read was very much my voice speaking to Helen, these poems represent her voice. In her latter years of her life, she found herself quite disabled and having to use a wheelchair. And this poem appears in a Dreich anthology called Isms, which deals with various isms that people have and prejudices they have, and one of those is ableism. So those poems are written, the first one is Helen speaking to me, the second one speaking to people around her, and not just speaking for herself, but hopefully for a lot of people in a similar position. Ex Cathedra 1. What do I do when, darling, you are buzzing around doing everything for me? I spend every moment of every day attempting the impossible. I spend the whole of my waking life trying to feel normal, just trying to feel normal. I know I'm often nicer to strangers than to you, my love. You do for me things I want to be able to do for myself. When I spit orders and seem to treat you wrong, it is with frustration and embarrassment, that is all. Ex Cathedra 2. Talking from above my chair, over my head, talking to my husband, not me, as if I was dead or invisible or unable to speak. Would you like this or that? Why don't you just ask me? Avoiding eyes, just look at me. I'm not a pet or a child, I am a woman. Capable of deciding for myself like any other human. Do not assume, do not make an ass out of me and you, man. And when you do deign to speak directly to me, you do not have to raise your voice or speak slowly. A wheelchair is not an indicator of deafness or difficulty of understanding. My legs may have given up, but the rest of me is working. As well as a brain and a voice, I have a heart and pride, and both of them are hurting. I don't mind you looking down when it's to better see me. I just won't find it acceptable when you view me as beneath you.
I wanted to chat maybe, Peter, about the last two, and then we'll maybe talk a wee bit about Lost, Found in France, or Lost in France, maybe it could be called as well. I wondered that last poem, yeah, a big cry for disability rights and the idea of ableism for anybody, that would be anybody in that situation. But I wondered what you thought and how you felt when you saw people talking over the chair to you. You know,
well,
how do you feel? How did you feel? Did you feel irritated, angry, or you're just dealing with what you had to deal with these people?
Well, I think there's two aspects to that. The first, and this is where I would be as guilty as those, is that initially I didn't realize it myself.
Yeah.
You know, because you're not in that position yourself, you miss the subtleties of it, you miss the nuances. of the fact that if you're sitting down, especially at a lower level, because you're in a chair, and there's these conversations going on over your head, if you're not actually in that perspective, you just don't appreciate it at first.
Yeah.
So I had to be taught, you know, it's just like people have to be taught about racism sometimes, because they don't realize that they're saying things that are, and sometimes people don't mean to be ableist or racist or anything like that. But when you're on your own with your wife and she then explains these things to you and tells you how bad she felt, then first of all, it impacts on you because you didn't, you missed it, yeah. And then as a follow-up to that, next time there's a situation like that, you do find yourself, rather than just getting angry, you find yourself intervening, you know, and you'll say things like, why don't you ask my wife? You know, why are you speaking to me?
I remember that exactly with my mum, because she was, you know, in a wheelchair as well. And at one point she said, by the way, I'm still in here. I'm staying away with my mum. I'm still in the room. And I thought, oh my goodness. But I realised, yes, like you, that I hadn't taken in the full significance of the situation for her. But also quite often at that time, obviously you're slightly, and it's usually quite serious conversations, perhaps with medical professionals. So you're trying to engage for the best for them. That's what I try to explain back to her. I'm sorry I missed that, but
yeah,
part of it was I was on alert to make sure that you were getting, this person and I were perfectly understanding what your needs were, forgetting that you're in between us, you know.
yeah.
But I thought that was a fabulous poem, and is one of these that should be widely circulated, I think, in schools and anywhere like that. Any of these kind of things, just like ones on race, just for people to remember. That would be a really good poem for a general circulation, I think. And then the other one, yeah, I don't know. I think when you were talking about spitting orders, I feel as well, I mean, one of the things I felt about this was I could see it all. I could see it all exactly. And that familiarity of you is the reason that you are getting presumptuous, nice at the other people than you. But again, I wondered how you felt using your wife's voice to expose perhaps her shortcomings towards you.
Yeah, well, I couldn't have done it. I could never have done it in my voice. I could never have said, and to be honest, most of the time she worried about things like that more than I did.
Yeah.
Because that's actually one of the things I was better at, was understanding her frustration and understanding, yes, if I was in that position,
I'd be habit as well.
Yeah, I'd probably be worse than that.
Yeah.
You know, whereas the fact that she and that although it's my sort of poem, it really is her voice, it is things that she said to me.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, she would every now and again she would say to herself, I've given him a hard time and I've got to tell him about it. And very often my reply to that would be, well, you know, thanks for saying that, but I didn't notice. Because that was, I think, while I didn't realize the perspective thing of sitting in a wheelchair and having things going on above your head and people apparently treating you as if you're not there or as if you're deaf or whatever.
Dead even. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or dead. Yes. Yeah. That was something that I did miss and went over my head. However, the thing about getting a bit crabbit, as you say, was something that, you know, I didn't really. You were just getting on with it. It went over my head. I didn't really notice that. Yeah. But I suppose in the same way as the first poem was. The very first poem, the French one, was about me having to explain things in a way that it's obviously not necessary to explain to someone who's passed on. In just the same way, my wife found it necessary to explain to me when she felt she had perhaps been a bit crabbit and a bit
Yeah.
not the way.
Again,
she-
I think that's another poem that's one of these ones that'd be really good, because I think, especially like my father many years ago had a massive stroke, and he said that, you know, I can watch Lassie in the television. I'm a 6'2" man. I'm watch Lassie in the television. I'm crying, and
Yeah.
then I'm Crabbit, and then I'm angry, and you know, his emotional roller coaster, and people have
Yeah.
to live with that. And I
Yeah.
think it helps if someone else is talking about that, and you realise that's part of this situation. You know,
Yeah.
that the emotional thing is going to be about a bit squiffy here and there now and then, and uncontrolled, and that's part of what's happened to the person.
Absolutely. I think it's understanding difficulties of that sort. As I say, it goes all the way through people who are vulnerable or who are put upon for any reason at all. Is that we all have to learn. We have to learn that we're all a little bit guilty of these things. And sometimes it helps to speak it out. It's one of the brilliant things about poetry and creativity in general, is that you can actually sit down with a piece of paper or a computer and start to put these things down,
Yeah.
and hopefully in a way that other people can relate to.
Well, hopefully these poems can go further afield, I would say. Found in France, this is my favourite poem. I think one of my favourites out of the book, so I was glad you selected that to do. And again, a way of you not enjoying it so much without her. But then there's also you at the end saying the only thing I didn't like about this was you weren't here, you know, which was it's a beautiful testimony to love, but also to recognition of self, you know, that you're there, you know, it's the beginning of starting to try and do something for yourself, get away from being in that environment, talking about it with people, whether however nice. And I remember you saying to me once, 3 months, my family were like, God, Dad, what are you going to, you know, that's too early. But I understand that very well, that needing to kind of find out how you are on your own. But beautiful, all these different things. And it's like, to me, this is like an existential poem of heightened awareness, I think. I remember when my father died, who I adored with my life, my friend said to me, well, that's you, doll. You know, she's Australian, that's you, doll. The world is going to come really close now. And I think there is something about grief. It sharpens everything in your senses up, you know. So for me, when I read that poem, I remember that feeling of hyper awareness of everything and yourself within it. And not just because you're on your own or you've lost somebody, but that would be beside you. It's just because you've lost somebody. Something happens, I think. And she tried to be sweet and say to me, hold on to that awareness. And I think what you've done here by getting this poem of that wonderful time, your eye is so sharp on all these things, particularly spindly legs of the spider, you know, absolutely gorgeous poetry, but all about the things that would be horrible for Helen. It was just absolutely brilliant the way you wrote that. And then it's that threat. There's a threat, all that, you know, we think the infestation's gone. And so there's a bit of humour in this as well, you know,
Yeah.
and home, you know, the lavender, you would have loved that at home, but here it's just attracting shit that'll make you not like it. But and then there's everything for me in this poem. There's that, as I say, existential awareness, there's a threat, there's humour, and then there's sensuality just in that one line with something going through her lush long hair. It's just a moment of sensuousness for you where you see that hair, you know, beautiful poem. But I wonder, I was saying found in France, it could be lost in France. Did you find yourself found in France or a mix of both?
Okay, going on that, it was a 1 week, it was a painting course where, as you'll know from one of the other poems in it, I was totally and completely out of my depth. But it was something I was both frightened of doing, but also looking forward to, and it was a challenge. And I think I felt at that time in my grief, which was just, it was still very, very raw in 3 months, I felt something, I needed to do something that would actually challenge me.
Distraction as well, huge distraction
Yeah.
perhaps.
Well, it was a distraction in the sense that during a large part of the day, there was so much work involved, and it was so intense, especially for someone who was very unfamiliar with the technical side of it. And it was a pressure. And yes, that made it a distraction. It was also absolutely idyllic countryside. It was beside vineyards. It was, the sun shone every day. We ate outdoors, lunch and dinner. I mean, everything about it was just what you would want from a holiday in the south of France. But at the end of each day, you go back to your room on your own, and then everything just floods in.
Yeah.
So the distraction does so much.
Yeah.
But I think it does to some extent help to balance things up a little bit. When you come home, everything is still as it was when you left, but you feel you have challenged yourself, you've survived that challenge, and you've come home. And I think you just feel you've got a bit more resilience, a bit more strength.
Good.
And you wouldn't know that if you didn't sort of do the test. So
Would
I
you ever
did
go
the
back
test.
there?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'd be different. Different stages.
In different circumstances, yes.
Good. So I'm looking forward. We could chat more, but I'm really looking forward to hearing your other poems. So I'm going to invite you to read another couple of poems for us if you're up for that, Peter. And aren't we enjoying this, folks? What a writer!
Thanks very much, Linda. Right, this is a bit of a contrast. These two poems, I think, are a bit of a contrast from anything that's gone before. The first one is of some age. I wrote it back in early part of 2018, and it related to negotiations that were going on at that time in January 2018 between North and South Korea, when they agreed to march their athletes together under one flag at the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. They also fielded a joint women's ice hockey team. And it was regarded as a very dramatic gesture of reconciliation between those two very much opposed countries. And it came at a very important time, just as there was prospect of war over North Korea's nuclear and missile tests. And it raised international hopes of a continuing thaw in relations between the two countries, which of course were at one time one country. It's called Thaw. Thaw. Just as the seasons, snows threaten sibling permafrost, Pyongyang crosses the border into Panmunjom to meet his brother Seoul in the Peace Village, showing strength in handshakes gladly reciprocated. Of Pyeongchang County Winter Games, talk begins. Of a break from war games, talk begins. If only in past times those men paused in Christmas truce for football and silent night in no man's land together, had jaw-jawed longer in the frost, exchange of words, of similarities reminded, would not further hostilities have been prevented. When brother and brother disarm to walk towards each other, larger will the human loom, smaller the difference seem. So be it now. So sad when families do not talk. And just in case things are getting too serious, I thought I would finish off with a poem from another Greek publication that came out this year called Things to Do with Love. This one is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It was created as a result of some work in one of Linda's Poets Time classes, and it's probably just about the only, I think it is the only sonnet I've done since I was at school. It's a standard Shakespearean sonnet, and it's to do with love. It's called Smitten. Though I cannot your steady pounding hear, I must address you now, my beating heart. Your ways are not the steadiest, I fear. They blind me to the cunning female art. All the sophistry that I have written does not assist me much in this great task. That you are quite so rapidly smitten, that fact must change. Is that too much to ask? Do not misunderstand. Your ways excite and lead me to experiences rare. Adventure seeking is your basic right, and love would not appear without you there. I am thankful to you, organ, please know, but need you to be more select and slow.
Yeah. So it does sound quite Shakespearean. You've kept it with that, you know, slightly, you know, the style of the writing is quite archaic in a little way, sophistry. But I did want to ask you if you could say a little bit more about this line particularly. You can imagine I'm going to do this. They blind me to the cunning female art. The they is the ways of the heart, your ways, the ways of the heart, the ways of your heart blind you to the cunning female art. Tell me about that. What is the cunning female art, Peter?
Well, you've got to remember this is very fictional. And obviously when you're putting together a sonnet, it's very important to find things that rhyme. So it isn't necessarily.
Lust does rhyme after task in a half rhyme, but I noticed she left that out.
Yes.
Left that out, and it was all about your heart. And I thought, maybe all these things are not necessarily about your heart, but it was very funny. I enjoyed
it. What I was trying to do, in fact, I've written another poem which is not a sonnet, which is not fictional, which I will definitely be reading at the avant-garde thing that I'm coming along to, and it's based on me being very, very naive when I was a teenager. And it's called The Factory Girls, and it's about the fact that you know, girls that have left school at 15 or 16 and are very worldly wise, and those who are still at school like I was, 14, 15, 16, in some cases are very naive. So there's an element of that in this.
Is it humorous, the one with the factory girls?
Yes, it is. It is. But it's humorous and factual, whereas this, of course, is humorous and fictional. But in a sense, it's a similar theme of pretend the voice in this is of a very naive man who believes he is. And it's not really his fault falling in love with people really quickly or fancying people very quickly.
Yeah, that's the one.
It's actually down to women. It's all them. It's their cunning arts that make men feel that way. Whereas he's just a poor fool dragged along by his heart.
I'm so glad this is satirical, Peter. I could be screaming.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
I mean that whole thing about it's the female cunning art that causes all sorts of things for women to happen to women, and it's their own fault. But I like the way you did this, and but I was a wee bit kind of but I liked smitten, and because that smitten does reduce it down from anything serious. It's just somebody having a fancy, feeling lustful. you know, and then think I'm just blaming it on them. It's them. It's doing it. You know, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
very funny.
Smitten is one of my favourite words, but I don't get much chance to use it.
Well, there it is. You've got it.
There it is.
So, what is the greatest task? To resist desire. Hilarious. To just resist that feeling of desire. But and I was wondering, is it the heart that makes selections? It's just I was having such a nice time reading it and asking questions about it. But it's great. So the first poem you read, I liked the three kind of parts, which is the Korean thing, and then the Second World War mention. You know, you're bringing that in. But the biggest hook for me in this was at the very end, which sounded particularly like a kind of a hook into something else that would start another poem, perhaps, or could have. You know, that poem written in reverse. You know, you've got the time of the games, the Winter Games, then you've got the Second World War, and then that last line. And you've got a kind of almost biblical thing when you say "Let it be now" or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. So be it now.
So be it.
And that it immediately initiates something important coming after. And what it is when families do not talk. And then taking it back to your former poems, grief and families. You know, there can be an awful lot of friction happens, whether with yourself or, I mean, people never speak again after funerals. You know, there's terrible things happen. And I felt that was, you know, I could almost see a poem coming after that starts telling a wee bit about that, then moves to another scene at Christmas, the Second World War. And then, so, you know, I could almost see it going like this and kind of opening up again. So that was very, very poignant at the end of that.
Yeah. Although having said that, it was that last part of it was deliberately meant to apply to both situations. You know, it is it's a terrible thing.
When governments don't talk. When governments don't talk.
Yes, but South Korea and North Korea, you know, should be family effectively. In fact, a lot of them are family. A lot of families are split. Because of the breakup between South and North Korea. So that there is a specific application to the Koreas in speaking about when families do not talk. But yes, there's a universal application, whether it's individuals within a family, whether it's governments not speaking to each other. And
Germany would have been an interesting one as well, because, you know, kind of familiar with Germany a lot in my own life, and the East and West Berlin. You know, I know of families that didn't see one another to, you know, the celebration of the wall coming down, which was a bit more cynical for me, actually. Knew a few people that worked in the University of East Berlin, and they just saw that, okay, what was happening over there wasn't right, but they saw that as a way of stealing jobs and putting it under the auspices of families can all reunite. The fact is they did, because there were families living on either side that hadn't seen one another for generations, it seemed, you know. It was.
I should probably also say that although that Thaw isn't published anywhere, anywhere in paper, round about the time, shortly after I wrote it, Leslie Traynor, whom you probably are aware of, as well as being a very good poet, is also a talented putting films together, film poems. And at the time, she was looking for a presentation she was about to do in the CCA. She was looking for poems to work into film poems. And she made an absolutely brilliant film poem of that, which is still available on YouTube. But she put it together really, really quickly. Well, it's called Thaw.
Right, so you just put in Thaw on YouTube, or do you need anything else?
If you put in Thaw film poems, and maybe even put Leslie Traynor's name in, or maybe my name, I don't know. And hopefully it should come up. But she did a fantastic job and put it together very, very quickly for the presentation she did at CCA. Amongst others, she had 4 or 5 other poems that she worked on.
I'll maybe try and see, I'll speak to Leslie and see if she's okay to put a link to that then, and might put it up as well on Seahorse Publications, so that comes after
Yeah.
the film, I'll link it to it.
Yeah, I'm sure she would provide you with the link to her. I think she's got a YouTube site specifically for film poems. Yeah.
So thank you very much for being here this morning, and I really enjoyed hearing your work. It's always much better to actually hear. But as I say, The Found in France remains one of my absolute favourite poems. So thanks for writing it. I like to go back to that poem. I think it's wonderful, really wonderful. So
Very kind of you.
I'll see you next week. So Peter's going to be performing at Seahorse Publication event in Avant-Garde, Seahorse Muse event, and it's called a night of exchanges, and it's bringing all different groups from across Scotland together. There'll be readings and then tables with invitations to sign up, join, or find out things about various Wigton books, the Gathering in Stonehaven, Speaking Weird in Aberdeen, Federation, Scottish Writers, so representations around. So I hope you managed to that, and we're going to hear Peter reading his work there, especially looking forward to this naive laddie with the school bag in amongst the factory workers. That's going to be amazing. So thank you very much, Peter, for joining us, and thank you everyone out there. Thank you very much for coming along to Poets Time, and we'll have another one up for you shortly. So spread the word, enjoy, and come along if you can on the 25th to Avant-Garde. It's free. Come along and see Peter and listen to Peter reading his work, amongst others.
And lots and lots and lots of other people.
Lots and lots and lots of other people.
Yes.
So, so goodbye for now, and enjoy your day. See you soon. Thanks, Peter, again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.